All the pundits were skeptical. They said, oh, Obama thinks that all these young people are going to come out. They never come out. And we were there at that caucus night, and college student after college student and high school students were coming out in record numbers. We had as many young people voting as senior citizens. That has never happened in the annals of American history, but it's happening in this election.
I would say that young people are the reason that Barack Obama has been elected. They were supporting him early, they supported him often, they supported him, they were his margin of victory in Iowa, which was that crucial first caucus. I spoke with about 30 young people around the country about their experiences working on the Obama campaign. And what I think is really striking is that a year later, a good 50% of them have their lives have totally changed since the election, because of the election. I tried to get a really broad mix of young people, from people who volunteered twice to people who volunteered for a year and a half nonstop and didn't even have doctor's appointments during that time period. You know, if I had relied on the DNC to get my volunteers or my staffers, I would have had superstars nonstop. And I tried to get a mix that included the superstars. But then there were people like Muhammad Diabate, who I interviewed in College Park, Maryland, who canvassed a couple times for the campaign and would love to be involved but can't afford to. Damon Drummer was a field organizer in South Carolina during the primary campaign season, and he spent about 7.5 months in this little town called Marion. And while he was there, his 3 biggest key organizers were this high school student who had a history of disciplinary problems, a barber, and a school janitor, a custodian.
Marcus Ryan, who was a firefighter and now is in D.C., weatherizing homes. So that was a pretty radical shift. Mike Jones, a volunteer. Went back to school, but the subjects that he's studying have been profoundly changed, and he is actually very interested in community building, issues of community building and how that happens, and the role of narratives within that. And there were people like Marianne Van Noordik, who was a cellist and now works as a union organizer.
Damon was telling me that this guy was really proud about what he was doing and about his involvement in hopefully the election of the first black president. Unfortunately, after the election, this young man seems to have gotten himself into some trouble and is currently in jail. I'm not sure why he's in jail. I know that he is getting out in the next month or so. But what Damon told me is that, this is a guy who was very much a leader, who had a ton of potential, but after the election, nothing really changed in his community. There were no magical new opportunities because Barack Obama was in the White House. I would say that there's a huge range of opinions about Barack Obama. I talk to people who, like Jenny Montoya Tanzi, who says, I am 200% behind this guy. I will ride with him until the wheels fall off. And then there are people who have been really disappointed. People like Jake Harvey, who is a young man in Arizona who actually has leukemia and who worked really, really hard on the campaign, and who's gay and who's really disappointed in Obama's lack of leadership on those issues. He really wants to use the skills that he developed as a volunteer to hold Obama accountable. So I would say that there's a pretty good mix. I would say maybe 5 or 10 who are absolutely pro-Obama and you can't say anything negative about him around them or else they'll get very angry. And then another 10 who are supportive but sort of wait and see, and then another 10 who are really skeptical and who have been really disappointed for a variety of reasons.
Probably the biggest priority right now is healthcare and climate change and green jobs, and there's a lot of organizing that goes on around that. There have already been some victories. The stimulus bill, for example, included $50 million for green jobs training for low-income youth, which is incredibly important because the unemployment for youth from 16 to 24 is actually at 52%. It's the highest since World War II. So That's incredibly important. There's also a lot of energy around immigration reform, and especially the passage of the DREAM Act. There are 2.5 million undocumented students in America, undocumented youth in America, and they really want to see the DREAM Act passed. I also see a lot of energy around opposition to education cuts. And then finally, I think there's also there's a lot of energy around the Youth Promise Act as well, which really wants to move resources from incarceration to social services. Across the board on almost any issue, if you want to reform something, the youth age group is probably the most supportive group for that issue, so it's a tactical mistake not to tap into it and constantly and directly address that constituency.